The night sky above the alien city was heavy with strange lights, glowing purple clouds, and ships moving like silent shadows. A human traveler named Daniel walked alone through the marketplace, his boots echoing softly on the metal ground. He was tired after a long journey, only searching for a place to rest, but destiny had something else waiting for him. Among the noise of merchants shouting and strange creatures bargaining, a sudden soft voice reached his ears. It was not a voice of trade, not a voice of power, but a trembling whisper. "Human, can you do this to me from behind?" The words froze Daniel where he stood. He turned slowly, his eyes locking on a small alien girl crouched behind a pile of broken crates. She was young, her frame delicate, her skin pale with faint glowing marks that pulsed in rhythm with her heartbeat. Her large eyes shimmered with both fear and hope, and her thin arms were covered with rough chains that rattled when she moved. Daniel's heart tightened at the sight. He had seen slavery before, but never such desperation in a single glance. The girl's words still echoed in his mind, strange and confusing, yet the meaning was not what the marketplace crowd would think. Her voice cracked as she spoke again. "Please, break these chains from behind. They are locked tight. I cannot reach them. You are human. You are strong." Suddenly, the truth struck him. She was not asking for shame. She was begging for freedom. Daniel knelt closer, his shadow falling over her. "Why me?" he asked in a low voice. The girl's lips trembled, her eyes darting nervously at the guards standing nearby. "Because only a human dares to touch what my people fear. Only you can do this. I have waited for one of your kind." Her words carried weight, not just fear, but belief in something larger than either of them. Daniel's mind raced. He had promised himself never to get involved in other people's wars again. He had seen enough blood, enough pain, but something inside him would not let him walk away. The girl's chains were cruel, sharp spikes dug into her skin whenever she moved. He could see the fresh wounds, the dried blood, the way her body shivered from exhaustion. She was more than a slave. She was broken and still fighting to live. The marketplace around them carried on, unaware of the silent struggle in the shadows. Daniel leaned closer, whispering, "If I break these, they will come for us both. Do you understand?" The girl nodded quickly, her breath shaking. "Yes, but I will belong to you, I swear it. I will be your slave for life if you just free me." Her vow struck him harder than he expected. This was no simple plea. It was a bond she was trying to forge. Daniel's chest tightened with conflict. He had never wanted a servant, never wished for power over another life. But looking into her desperate eyes, he felt the weight of choice pressing down on him. He reached out slowly, his fingers brushing the cold metal of the chains. The girl flinched, then relaxed, as if his touch alone gave her strength. "Stay quiet," he whispered. "I will try." Her breath caught, and for the first time, a tiny flicker of hope lit her eyes. The night was no longer silent. The sound of guards approaching echoed across the marketplace, boots striking in rhythm, voices barking orders. Daniel knew the moment he pulled on these chains, everything would change. The girl pressed closer, her whisper trembling but strong. "Please, human, behind me, now, before they see us." Daniel's hand tightened on the chain lock, his muscles coiling with decision. The request was strange, the danger was real, and yet his heart already knew the answer. In the darkness of that alien market, a human and a slave girl were about to rewrite their fates. The chains snapped with a sharp metallic crack, the sound ringing louder than Daniel wished. The alien girl gasped as the iron links fell from her wrists, leaving angry red marks on her pale skin. For the first time in what seemed like forever, her arms were free, yet her wide eyes did not show relief, only fear. She grabbed Daniel's sleeve tightly, her thin fingers trembling. "We must go now before they find us." Daniel pulled her up, and together they slipped into the shadowed alleys of the alien city. The market lights faded behind them, replaced by narrow paths filled with dripping pipes and broken walls. The girl moved with surprising speed for someone so weak, her bare feet barely making a sound. Daniel stayed close, watching every corner, every dark passage where danger might wait. Behind them, shouts rose like a storm. The guards had noticed the broken chains, the missing slave, and now the hunt had begun. The sound of boots grew louder, metal striking metal as patrols spread across the streets. The girl's breath grew quicker, and Daniel could feel her panic rising. "Stay calm," he whispered. "Fear will get us caught." But inside, he too felt the weight of danger pressing down. He was only one man, unarmed, in a city ruled by slavers. And beside him was a girl who had just pledged herself to him. The thought unsettled him, not because of her words, but because of the burden they carried. Finally, they ducked into a broken building, half collapsed with rust and rubble. Inside, the air was heavy with dust, shafts of dim light cutting through cracks in the roof. The girl leaned against the wall, her body shaking as she tried to catch her breath. Daniel crouched near the entrance, scanning the streets outside. "Who are they?" he asked in a low voice. "Why are they chasing you so fiercely?" The girl lifted her head, her glowing marks flickering weakly. "They are hunters, not just guards. Their task is to keep slaves from escaping. They punish those who try, and they kill those who help." Her words sent a chill through him. "So you knew this would happen if I touched your chains," he said, his voice calm but sharp. She nodded, her eyes filled with both sorrow and fire. "Yes, but I had no choice. I would rather die free than live one more day in chains." Daniel studied her carefully, the thin lines of scars across her arms and back, the hollow cheeks of someone starved. She was fragile, yet there was a strange strength in her, a fire that even slavery could not put out. For a moment, he wondered what she had endured to reach this point, to risk everything on a stranger. The thought tightened his chest. The girl stepped closer, her voice trembling but firm. "I promised myself, if I ever saw a human, I would beg for help. We believe humans carry courage in their hands, the kind that breaks all chains. I was not wrong. You proved it." Daniel turned his gaze away, unsure how to answer. He had not acted out of courage, only instinct, yet her eyes shone with gratitude, as if he was more than he believed himself to be. Suddenly, loud footsteps thundered past the broken building, voices barking in alien tongues. The girl stiffened, clutching Daniel's arm tightly. He pressed a finger to his lips, urging silence. The hunters stopped just outside, their shadows stretching across the cracks of the ruined wall. For a moment, the world froze, every sound magnified. The drip of water, the girl's heartbeat, the sharp crackle of radios. Daniel's muscles tensed, ready to fight if they entered. But after a long pause, the hunters moved on, their footsteps fading slowly into the distance. The girl let out a shaky breath, almost collapsing from the weight of her fear. Daniel steadied her, holding her upright, his voice low and steady. "We can and stay here. They'll search every ruin. We need to keep moving." Her eyes met his, filled with both terror and trust. "Then I follow you, wherever you go. I belong to you now." The words struck him harder than the chains had. He had freed her body, but now she had bound her spirit to him. And in the darkness of the alien city, Daniel realized their journey was no longer about escape alone. It was the beginning of something far greater. The night deepened as Daniel and the alien girl moved further away from the market. The city seemed alive with danger, every corner whispering of eyes that might be watching. The girl stayed close to him, her chains gone but her spirit still trembling with fear. Her soft steps echoed like a shadow of silence, and Daniel felt the strange weight of her presence. Finally, they stopped in an abandoned storage hall, its roof half broken and its walls covered with rust. A faint glow from the city lights slipped through the cracks, casting long shadows across the floor. Daniel dropped down to sit against the wall, his muscles aching from tension. The girl hesitated, then slowly lowered herself beside him, her glowing marks shining faintly in the dark. For a long time, neither spoke. Only the sound of distant patrols drifted in from the streets, the hunters still searching for their lost prize. At last the girl broke the silence, her voice soft but steady. "I am yours now, human. I gave my vow already. My life belongs to you." Daniel turned his head sharply, her words striking something deep inside him. "I don't own you," he said, his voice rough. "I don't want a slave." Her eyes widened, confusion flickering like fire in her gaze. "But I swore it," she whispered. "It is the only way I can live now, without chains. I need to belong somewhere, to someone, and I chose you." Daniel's chest tightened. He had never asked for loyalty, never wished for such a burden. Yet here she was, offering her entire life as if it was nothing. Her thin fingers curled into the fabric of her torn clothes, her voice trembling. "If you, reject me, I am nothing. The hunters will take me again, or I will die alone." Her desperation cut through him more sharply than any blade. He studied her carefully, the scars on her arms, the faint glow of her skin, the hollow hunger in her eyes. She had been broken by cruelty, but even shattered, she still clung to hope, and somehow she had tied that hope to him, a stranger who had only acted on impulse. He could not understand why, but he could not deny it either. Daniel reached out slowly, placing his hand gently over hers. Her breath caught, her glowing marks flaring brighter for a moment. "I will not abandon you," he said firmly, "but don't call yourself a slave. You are free, and you walk beside me, not behind me." The girl stared at him, her lips parting as tears shimmered in her eyes. "No one has ever said that to me," she whispered, her voice breaking. "You give me more than freedom. You give me worth." For the first time since he found her, a fragile smile touched her lips. She leaned closer, her forehead almost brushing his shoulder. Daniel felt her body trembling, not just from fear, but from the weight of emotions she had never spoken before. The bond between them was forming, fragile yet unshakable, sealed not with chains, but with choice. Outside, the sound of hunters grew louder again, their voices echoing through the streets. Daniel tensed, his hand moving to steady the girl. She clutched his arm, whispering, "They will never stop. They will hunt me forever. But if I am with you, I do not fear them." Her words carried a strange power, as if her faith alone gave him strength. The moment stretched in silence, broken only by the distant thunder of boots. Daniel met her gaze, and in her eyes he saw not weakness, but a spark of something dangerous, hope mixed with devotion. He realized then that this was no longer about survival alone. By freeing her, he had created a bond stronger than chains, a vow that tied them both to a future unknown. The girl's voice trembled as she leaned close. "Then it is sealed, human. I am yours, not..." The city did not sleep. Even in the deepest hours of the night, the slaver guards searched like hungry predators, their lights cutting across streets, their voices sharp and angry. Daniel knew they could not hide forever in the ruined storage hall. The hunters would sweep through soon, and when they did, there would be no mercy. It was time to move. The alien girl stood silently by the cracked wall, her glowing marks dim as though she tried to hide even her own light. When Daniel rose, she looked at him with wide eyes, her voice low. "Where will we go, human? They control every gate, every path. If they find us, they will break us." Daniel tightened his jaw, his eyes scanning the dark horizon beyond the rooftops. "Then we don't give them the chance," he answered. "We move before dawn. We vanish into the wilds, somewhere their chains can't follow." The girl hesitated, then nodded, her faith still strange but unshakable. Together, they slipped out of the hall, hugging the shadows of broken alleys, moving like ghosts beneath the watchful eyes of towers. Daniel led the way with silent steps, his senses sharp, his body tense with every sound. Behind him, the girl followed closely, her breath soft, her bare feet quick on the cold metal ground. At the edge of the city, the glow of walls loomed high, bright with security lights. Patrols marched along the barricades, scanners sweeping across the ground like blades of white fire. The girl gripped Daniel's arm, her whisper urgent. "We can't go through, they will see us, we will die here." But Daniel's gaze shifted to the shadows near the sewage drains, half hidden under twisted pipes and discarded metal. "There," he muttered. "They guard the gates, but they never watch the dirt beneath their boots." The crawl through the drain was foul, filled with stench and slime. The girl gagged softly, pressing her glowing hand against her lips. But she pushed on, her small frame sliding through easily. Daniel followed behind, his shoulders scraping against the rusted walls, the filth clinging to his clothes. It was suffocating, but freedom was waiting at the other end. At last they emerged outside the walls, stumbling into the tall alien grass that swayed under the night wind. The stars stretched endless above, cold and bright, the city's glow fading behind them like a nightmare left in shadows. The girl collapsed to her knees, gasping, tears streaking her dirty face. "We made it," she whispered, her voice shaking between relief and disbelief. Daniel knelt beside her, his hand resting lightly on her shoulder. "Not yet. The hunters will not stop. They will chase us into the wilds. We have to keep moving." The wilderness stretched before them, a vast land of sharp rocks, glowing swamps, and trees that bent like skeletal arms. Strange cries echoed from the distance, creatures stirring in the night. The girl clung to Daniel's sleeve, her eyes wide with both fear and awe. "I have never been outside the walls," she confessed. "Slaves are not allowed. They say the wilds devour the weak." Daniel looked ahead, his jaw firm. "Then we will prove them wrong." But already behind them, the faint sound of alarms rose into the night air. The hunters had discovered the broken chains, the trail through the drains, and soon they would follow. The girl stiffened, fear returning like a knife twisting inside her chest. Daniel gripped her hand, pulling her to her feet. "No more chains, remember. You're free now, and freedom means we fight. We run, we live." They pushed deeper into the alien wilderness, their footsteps swallowed by the tall grass. The night carried the scent of danger, but also the promise of something new. Every moment was borrowed time, every step a gamble against death. And yet, for the first time, the girl's trembling hand in Daniel's was not only fear, it was trust. The escape had begun, and with it, the start of a journey that would change both their lives forever. The wilderness was endless, a dark sea of alien trees stretching under the pale light of foreign moons. Daniel pushed forward, guiding the girl through winding paths, always listening for the sound of hunters behind them. Every whisper of the wind, every crack of a branch made him tense, yet they pressed on, step by step. The girl never let go of his sleeve, her trust heavy, like a vow that could not be broken. By dawn, they reached a rocky ridge where strange plants glowed with soft blue light. Daniel stopped, letting the girl rest, her small frame trembling from exhaustion, her glowing marks flickering faintly. She sat against a stone, her eyes fixed on him, as if she had been waiting for this moment. "Human," she whispered, her voice raw. "You must know why I begged you, why I called for you and no one else." Daniel frowned, his body stiffening at her words. He had wondered since the market why she had chosen him, why she had spoken those strange words that first froze him in place. Now, in the stillness of the alien dawn, she seemed ready to reveal what lay behind her desperate plea. He leaned closer, his voice calm but edged with suspicion. "Tell me then, what do you believe about humans, and why me?" Her eyes glistened, shimmering with both fear and hope. "My people believe humans carry a power that others cannot. We call it the touch of courage. It is said no chain can hold a human spirit, and no wall can resist when a human decides to break it. That is why I trusted you." Daniel's brows tightened, the weight of her words pressing into his thoughts. It sounded like legend, a story told to slaves to give them hope, and yet her faith was real, alive, unshakable. She reached out her hand, showing him the scars around her wrists. "For years I prayed to see a human, even just once. I told myself if one ever came, I would give my life to him, because a human's coup. Rage would be my freedom." Her voice cracked, but she did not look away. Daniel stared at her, his heart heavy, torn between disbelief and the pull of her desperate devotion. "You make me sound like a hero," he muttered, his voice low. "But I am only a man, flesh and bone, no different from anyone else." The girl shook her head fiercely, her glowing marks flaring brighter. "No, you are different. Even now you saved me when others would have walked away. You carry what they fear. That is why the hunters chase harder. They fear the courage of a human more than the rebellion of 1,000 slaves." Daniel exhaled slowly, the truth in her words unsettling him. Maybe he did not see himself as special, but to her, he was more than flesh. He was proof that hope was not dead, and perhaps that belief was more dangerous than any weapon. Suddenly, a distant howl echoed across the ridge, not human, not slaver, but something wild. The girl shivered, pulling closer to him. "The wilds are full of creatures, some worse than the hunters, but I am not afraid, not as long as you are here." Her trembling words carved deeper into him than any blade. Daniel knew then that her vow was not only about chains, it was about belonging, about finding worth in a world that had stripped her of everything. As the sun rose higher, spilling pale gold light over the alien land, Daniel stood tall, scanning the horizon. The hunters would not give up, the wilds would test them, but the truth had been spoken, the curtain pulled back. This was no longer only her escape, it was their journey, bound by faith and by the fire of survival. And though Daniel doubted legends, he could not deny the strange bond that had already begun to change him. The girl whispered softly as the wind carried her words away. "You are human, and that is enough." And Daniel realized that behind her fragile form was a belief stronger than any chain, a belief that would follow him wherever the path led next. The wilds stretched before them, a maze of sharp rocks, twisting trees and glowing swamps. Daniel led carefully, his eyes scanning every shadow, his senses sharpened by the silence that seemed too heavy. The girl walked close behind him, her glowing marks dim, as if she tried to hide even her own light. Her breath was soft, but her fear clung to the air like mist. By midday, they reached a narrow valley where tall cliffs rose like walls. Daniel stopped, crouching low, and raised his hand for silence. The girl froze instantly, her wide eyes watching him with trust. Then the sound came, distant, faint, but clear, the metallic rhythm of boots, the low growl of alien voices. The hunters had found their trail. Daniel cursed under his breath, gripping a broken branch like a weapon. They had moved fast, too fast, faster than he expected, which meant they were trained for this kind of pursuit. The girl trembled, whispering, "They are close. I can feel them. They never stop. They always catch what runs." Daniel turned to her, his eyes steady. "Not this time, not us." Her lips parted as if to speak again, but she stopped when she saw the fire in his expression. For a moment, the chains she once wore seemed like a distant memory, replaced by the shield of his determination. The sound of hunters grew louder, echoing through the cliffs, their voices sharp, barking orders. Shadows flickered against the rocks, beams of light sweeping back and forth. The girl pressed herself against Daniel's back, her hands clutching his shirt. Her whisper was soft but filled with desperation. "They smell fear. They will hear my heartbeat." Daniel placed his hand over hers, steady and strong, then let them hear mine instead. Her trembling slowed, her breath steadying against him. For a moment, in the darkest of dangers, he gave her something she thought impossible: calm. But the danger was real. And closing fast, Daniel pulled her deeper into the valley, weaving between jagged rocks, moving silently through the twisting paths. Every step was careful, every sound measured, but the hunters were relentless. The faint click of their weapons carried through the air, promising pain if they were caught. At last they found a cave hidden under an overhang of stone. Daniel guided her inside, pressing her against the wall as he crouched near the entrance. They waited in silence, their bodies close, the tension heavy enough to crush the air. Outside, the hunters passed like shadows, their lights sweeping dangerously near. The girl buried her face against his shoulder, her glowing marks flickering wildly. Daniel kept one arm steady around her, his other hand gripping the branch like it was steel. He whispered so softly only she could hear, "Stay strong. No sound, no movement." Her heart pounded against him, yet she obeyed, trusting his strength more than her own. Minutes passed like hours until the sound of boots began to fade. Daniel exhaled slowly, but he knew it was not over. The hunters would circle back. They always did. The girl looked up at him, her voice trembling. "Why do you risk this for me? Why not leave me and save yourself?" Daniel's eyes met hers, fierce and unwavering. "Because I gave you freedom, and freedom means I stand with you, no matter the cost." Her eyes filled with tears, not of fear, but of something deeper. She pressed her forehead lightly to his arm, whispering, "Then I will never leave your side, even if the galaxy hunts us." The hunters were still near, their shadows returning, their voices sharper. Daniel tightened his grip, his heart steady, ready for what came next. The chase was far from over, but in that cave, in the stillness of danger, a bond had grown stronger than chains, and as the hunters closed in once more, Daniel knew that his fight was no longer about survival alone. It was about protecting the vow they had sealed. The cave was dark and damp, the only light coming from the faint glow of the girl's markings. Her body trembled against the cold stone, her breath uneven, her eyes full of fear. Outside, the hunters' voices echoed faintly, their search never-ending, their chains rattling like ghosts in the wind. Daniel stayed close to her, his body tense, his ears tuned to every sound beyond the cave. The girl clutched her knees, whispering in a voice barely stronger than a breath, "They will find us. I cannot stop shaking. They will hear me. They will smell my fear." Her words carried the weight of despair, the sound of a heart close to breaking. Daniel turned his head toward her, his voice low and steady. "You are not in chains anymore. Remember that. You are free. No one owns your fear now." But still, she shook, her glowing marks flickering wildly, betraying her terror. At last, she pressed her face into her arms and whispered, "Then touch me, human, from behind. As I asked before, I need to feel your strength. Only then I can believe I am safe." Her words made Daniel pause, his chest tightening. He understood now. Her strange request was never about shame or weakness, but about trust, about the simple comfort of knowing he stood behind her, protecting her back. Slowly, he reached out, placing his hand gently on her shoulder, his warmth steady and unshakable. Her body stiffened, then softened under his touch, her trembling slowing with every heartbeat. He kept his hand firm, not moving, just there, just present. "You are not alone anymore," he whispered. "As long as I live, no chain, no hunter, no shadow will take you again." The girl let out a shaky breath, her voice breaking into quiet sobs. Her tears glistened in the dim glow, sliding down her cheeks, but her trembling began to fade. She leaned back slightly, letting his presence steady her, letting his strength become her sea. Healed. It was not the touch of a master, nor the grip of control, but the hand of someone who refused to let her fall. Minutes passed in silence, the hunter's sounds fading farther into the distance. The danger was not gone, but in that moment the fear inside her was. She looked up at him with wet eyes, her voice fragile but stronger than before. Your touch. It feels like chains breaking, not binding. It feels like I can breathe for the first time. Daniel did not answer, only pressed his hand a little firmer, a silent promise carved without words. She lifted her hand slowly, placing her small fingers over his, holding it against her shoulder. I do not fear the hunters now, she whispered, because you are here, because you touched me when no one else would. You gave me more than freedom. You gave me a reason to live. Her glowing marks shimmered brighter, not with fear but with something new, something alive. Daniel saw it in her eyes, a fire that had been buried under chains, now rising again. Outside, the wind shifted, carrying the distant sound of hunters regrouping. Daniel withdrew his hand and stood, scanning the cave's entrance, his voice steady. We cannot stay. They will return. But you are stronger now. I see it in you. The girl rose slowly, wiping her tears, her voice trembling but filled with courage. Because you touched me, human, and showed me I am not worthless. I will walk beside you, not behind. Together they stepped out of the cave, the wilderness stretching ahead like a test waiting to be faced. The hunters were still close, their shadows still searching, but something had changed. The girl no longer hid her glow, no longer curled into fear. Her light burned brighter, guided by the human's touch. And as they walked into the rising dawn, Daniel realized that sometimes the smallest act, one hand, one promise, could break the deepest chains. And for the girl, that touch had turned fear into strength, sealing the bond between them forever. The wilderness grew colder as night returned, the wind carrying strange howls from unseen creatures. Daniel and the alien girl moved carefully along a ridge, the moonlight casting silver shadows across the rocks. Every step was heavy with exhaustion, yet neither spoke of rest. Both knew the hunters would not stop. Their journey had become a battle of silence, survival, and trust. At last, faint lights appeared in the distance, flickering from a cluster of huts hidden among the trees. The girl tugged Daniel's sleeve, her eyes wide with hope. Maybe they can help us. Maybe they are not slavers. Daniel hesitated, scanning the settlement with sharp eyes, his instincts heavy with caution, but the girl's voice carried such desperate longing that he could not refuse, at least not yet. They approached slowly, the smell of firewood drifting through the air, the sound of voices soft and welcoming. A group of cloaked figures emerged, their faces half hidden, but their hands open in greeting. Travelers, one of them said in a deep voice, you look hunted. Come, rest. No one will harm you here. The girl's face lit with fragile joy, her trembling easing for the first time since her escape. Daniel did not lower his guard, but he allowed them inside a hut where food and water were offered. The girl drank greedily, tears running down her cheeks at the simple taste of freedom. Daniel sat nearby, his eyes never leaving the cloaked figures, his hand resting near a sharp piece of broken wood he had kept as a weapon. For a while, it felt almost safe, almost like the world had paused. But safety is a fragile mask, and masks always crack. When night deepened, Daniel noticed the glances the cloaked ones exchanged, the way they whispered too quietly. The girl leaned against him, her eyes half closed from exhaustion, trusting that she could finally rest. Daniel's chest tightened, his instincts screaming a warning he could not ignore. Moments later, the truth revealed itself. The door slammed shut, and two figures grabbed Daniel from behind, rough hands forcing him to the ground. The girl screamed, her voice sharp with terror. No, you promised us safety. But one of the cloaked figures laughed cruelly, pulling back his hood, revealing the mark of a slaver burned into his skin. Safety, the slaver sneered. You are valuable, girl. Your chains will be reforged, and the human will fetch a high price too. The girl struggled as they seized her, her glowing marks flaring wildly as she cried out, Daniel! Daniel's muscles burned as he fought against the weight pressing him down, fury rising hotter than fire. He had trusted too little, yet even that had been too much, and now they would both pay. The slavers dragged the girl toward the door, her nails scraping the ground as she reached for him. Her voice broke, desperate and raw. You freed me. You cannot let them take me again. I belong to you. Daniel's blood thundered in his ears, her plea striking like a blade to his heart. He roared with strength, twisting against his captors, slamming one into the wall with brutal force. The hut erupted into chaos, fists, chains, and firelight clashing in a storm of violence. The girl struggled wildly, her glowing marks blazing like fireflies, her cries echoing in the night. Daniel's hands became weapons. Fueled by rage and the promise he had made, he fought with the fury of one who refused to break his vow. But numbers pressed against him, slavers swarming with cruel laughter. The girl's voice pierced through the noise, shaking, desperate, unyielding. "Daniel, please, do not let them bind me again." Her scream cut deeper than pain, igniting something unbreakable within him. And as the night burned with betrayal, Daniel realized this was no longer escape. It was war. The hut burned with chaos, smoke curling toward the night sky as shouts echoed through the trees. Daniel's fists were bloodied, his chest heaving, yet he stood tall, refusing to fall under the weight of the slavers. The girl had been dragged away through the dirt, her cries cutting through the firelight like broken glass. Every sound of her struggle drove Daniel deeper into rage. The slavers thought they had broken him, thought one man could never stand against their chains, but they had underestimated the strength of a human heart when bound to a promise. Daniel ripped a broken chain from the wall and swung it like a weapon. The metal cracked against skulls, scattering enemies who had never expected resistance so fierce. The fire spread quickly, flames licking across the wooden walls, painting the night in red and gold. The girl screamed from outside, her voice carrying through the roar of fire. "Daniel, please!" Her voice struck him harder than the heat of the flames. He charged forward, tearing through the collapsing doorway, sparks biting into his skin. Outside, the slavers dragged her toward a cage on wheels, their cruel laughter mixing with the crackle of fire. Her glowing marks flickered wildly, a desperate beacon in the darkness. Daniel stormed through them, his chain whipping, his voice thundering with fury. "She is not yours!" The slavers faltered at the sight, some stepping back in fear, but others rushed forward with blades. The fight was brutal, each swing of the chain breaking bones. Each strike fueled by something more than survival. It was rage. It was defiance. It was the unshakable vow of a man who refused to let chains touch her again. The girl crawled backward, her wide eyes locked on him, tears streaming as she whispered, "He fights for me." Her words carried not just fear but awe, as though she saw a legend come alive before her. Blood sty. Ned the ground. Fire roared higher. The night filled with smoke and screams. Daniel's body burned with cuts and bruises, but his fury never slowed. He slammed the chain across the last guard, sending him crashing into the flames. Then he turned, his chest rising and falling like thunder, his eyes blazing with unbroken fire. The girl staggered to her feet, her glowing hands trembling as she reached for him. "Daniel," she whispered, her voice raw. "You are bleeding. You will die if you fight more." But he shook his head, his voice deep and steady. "Better to bleed free than live chained, and I will never let them take you again." Behind them, the rest of the slaver camp stirred, shadows moving in the distance, more chains rattling, more voices shouting. This was only the beginning. The fight had just drawn the whole nest of enemies to them. Daniel stood tall, the fire painting his silhouette like a warrior of old. The girl clung to his arm, her tears falling, but her heart burning with pride. "You broke their chains," she whispered. "But you broke something else too, the fear in me. It is gone." Her words struck him deeper than the wounds on his body, for in that moment Daniel realized the truth. He had not only saved her life, he had given her strength, and that strength now tied them together, stronger than iron, stronger than fire, stronger than fate. As the flames devoured the slaver camp, Daniel tightened his grip on the chain. The hunters would come again. The fight was far from over, but tonight he had torn apart the chains of cruelty. And in their place, he had forged something new, something that even fire could not burn away, freedom, and a bond sealed in blood and defiance. The fire behind them burned like a dying beast, its flames slowly turning to smoke under the pale morning sky. Daniel stood at the edge of the ruins, his hands bruised, his face streaked with ash, but his eyes sharp and alive. Beside him, the alien girl knelt in the dirt, staring at the wreckage of the cage that had once held her. Her fingers dug into the soil, as if touching the ground could remind her this was real, that she was truly free. The camp was gone, the slavers defeated, the chains broken, but silence lingered like fog. Daniel turned to her slowly, ready to speak, ready to say they had to move before more enemies came. But before he could open his mouth, she rose to her knees and lowered her head. Her voice trembled, but her words were clear. I give myself to you, forever. Daniel's heart paused at her vow. The girl looked up, tears falling freely now, her glowing marks pulsing with emotion. I swore I would belong to the human who saved me, not as a slave of chains, but as one who chooses. Her hands reached for his, trembling as she placed them over her heart. I am yours, Daniel, not by force but by soul. He stared at her, silent, his chest rising slowly with each breath. You don't have to say that, he said gently. You're already free. You owe me nothing. She shook her head, her voice firmer now. You don't understand. It's not about debt. It's about meaning, purpose, life. You showed me I matter. You gave me something more than escape. You gave me myself. Daniel stepped closer, his hand gently brushing the side of her face. Her skin was soft, warm, marked by glowing lines that danced under his touch. She closed her eyes, breathing in his presence as though it filled the hollow places inside her. I've never had a name, she whispered. Only numbers, only orders. Will you give me one, Daniel? Something that is mine alone. He looked into her eyes, searching for the right word, the right feeling. Leora, he said after a moment. It means light, the kind that leads you home. She gasped softly, her lips forming the name as if tasting hope for the first time. Leora, she repeated, her voice shining with emotion. That is who I am now. Daniel pulled her into his arms, holding her close as the wind stirred ashes around them. She buried her face against his chest, the sound of his heartbeat calming the last of her fears. No chains held her anymore. No collar marked her neck, only his arms, and the name he gave her, and the bond that had been born through fire and fight. I will follow you, Daniel, she said, her voice muffled against his shirt. Through forests or stars, through peace or war, even if the galaxy burns, I will not leave your side. Daniel felt something shift inside him, not just duty, not just protection, something deeper, something permanent. I won't ask for your loyalty, he replied, but I will earn it every day. The sun rose slowly over the smoking ruins, painting the sky with gold and red. Leora stood beside him now, no longer shaking, no longer small in spirit, her back straight, her eyes bright. She was no longer the girl begging for rescue. She was a flame that had survived the storm, and Daniel knew he hadn't just saved a life. He had awakened a soul. As they turned to leave the ashes behind, hand in hand, Leora whispered one last vow. Forever, Daniel, I will walk behind no one, not even you, but beside you as yours. And with that, her promise was sealed, not in chains, not in fear, but in love and choice and fire. The sky turned soft orange as morning light spilled across the alien land. Ashes from the burned slaver camp drifted in the wind, silent reminders of a battle won. Daniel and Leora stood together on a rocky cliff, overlooking the vast wilds that stretched endlessly into the unknown. Her glowing marks shimmered gently in the morning sun, no longer symbols of ownership, but of survival. They had no map, no ship, and no real plan, but they had something stronger, each other. Daniel adjusted the small pack slung over his shoulder, patched together from scraps. Leora tightened the cloth around her arms, her face calm but alert. We should head toward the northern ridges, Daniel said, pointing toward a path barely visible through the trees. According to the stars, there's an old supply station there, abandoned during the last trade war. Might have tech we can use. Leora nodded, her eyes scanning the path, but her fingers brushed his hand before she let go. She didn't need to speak. Her touch said everything. She trusted him, and she would follow. As they began walking, birds unlike any Daniel had seen flew overhead, their wings wide and glowing. Strange vines hung low from twisted trees, and the ground sparkled with mineral dust that stuck to their boots. Every step into the unknown felt like walking through a dream filled with beauty and danger, but neither of them feared it. Not anymore. They moved quietly, side by side, listening for sounds that didn't belong. Now and then, Daniel stopped to scan for tracks, his instincts sharp from years of surviving hostile lands. Leora crouched beside him, mimicking his movements, her senses fine-tuned from a life of hiding. Together, they made something new, not prey, not fugitives, but survivors reborn. Hours passed under the rising sun, sweat beading on their skin. Finally, they stopped to rest under a leaning stone arch where Ul's shade offered relief. Leora pulled a dry piece of bread from their bag, handing it to Daniel first. He smiled, breaking it in half and giving her the larger piece. "You forget," he said quietly. "You're the reason we made it this far." She shook her head, but her eyes softened. "I would have died back in that cage if you hadn't looked at me like I was worth saving," she said, her voice full of warmth. "You did more than break my chains, Daniel. You taught me what freedom feels like." Daniel leaned against the rock, the wind brushing through his messy hair. "Freedom isn't just escape," he replied. "It's choosing what comes next. And I choose this. Us." Leora looked down at her hands, the glowing lines pulsing gently. "I used to hate these marks," she whispered, "but now I see them as a map, a path that led me to you." Daniel reached over, taking her hand in his, firm and steady. "We keep moving," he said. "Whatever comes, we face it together." As the wind picked up, distant thunder rolled across the sky. Maybe it was a storm, or maybe it was the echo of trouble still chasing them. But neither of them flinched. They had already faced fire, betrayal, and blood, and they had chosen to rise. Leora stood and helped Daniel to his feet, her strength no longer hidden behind fear. They walked again, side by side, their shadows stretching long behind them. Every step into the future was a question, but the answer walked with them, hand in hand. And in that quiet moment, under an alien sky, a human and a former slave became something the galaxy had never seen. Partners, bonded not by chains but by choice. The sun rose higher, casting golden light across their path. It was a new dawn, and for the first time in both their lives, they were free to follow it wherever it led.